Hello everybody, Chassan here, and I've obviously not brushed my hair or put on my fake lashes. It's one of those lazy days. So on a lazy day, what do? I throw on some plastic glitter over my eyes so that I can feel more human. I know, plastic to feel more human. And that's one of these sort of dichotomous ideas that we're going to be exploring in this interview, this two-part interview that I've done with Sabrina Scott. And Sabrina is definitely one of my favorite witchy minds right now. And to help commemorate this two-part interview, her publisher, Red Wheel Wiser, they've been kind enough to send 2 new copies of her book, Witchbody. And I've been thinking, since it is a 2-part interview, let's give away one book in part 1 and the second book in part 2. This is going to be open to anybody, anywhere in the world, international. What you need to do is watch the interview to the very end, and I'm going to pose a question at the end of the interview, and then please comment down below. See you later. Back to the zhuzhing a little bit. Hello everybody, Chassan here. And today I have this gorgeous lady with me, and she is the author and illustrator of this really amazing graphic novel. Excuse the little the bookmarks, which are actually torn pieces of paper, but there were so many parts of this graphic novel that I just wanted to bookmark. And in the book she says, you know, write in the margins, do whatever, but I was just like, it's too pretty, so I just stuck in the paper. But guys, look at this. This is the front cover, called Witchbody. Here's the back cover.
This is so nice. I feel so flattered right now.
Gorgeous. All the detail and the love and care and the spirit that went into it. Come on, guys, look at this. Look at this. This book again is called Witchbody, and my guest today is Sabrina Scott. Hi, Sabrina.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here.
Who is Sabrina Scott? So Sabrina, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh my god. I'm so flabbergasted by that question because I do so much different stuff. So I'm just like, okay, how am I going to summarize this? So, okay, what's the short version? I've been doing witchcraft and magic stuff for about 20 years. I grew up in something called modern American spiritualism. So that's like talking to dead people, going to seances, watching tables move around from spirits, doing that, you know, regular, normal, chill stuff, no problem. And I'm also a university prof, and I'm doing my PhD in science and technology studies, basically philosophy around magic and stuff like that, and I do comics. So I do a lot of stuff, I guess. Oh yeah, and then I read tarot.
When I first got this book,
Really?
I expected, you know, Witchbody. I thought this was just going to be like a graphic novel talking about, you know, making yourself a cup of tea and doing magic over the cup of tea. And the thing is, guys, this cover is beautiful, but the insides, the contents are incredibly deep. Like, it says here, let me show this. Witchbody, a rambling and poetic autoethnography of Western occult magic as a pathway for environmental learning and advocacy. I opened to this page and I was just like, wait a second. I don't think this is going to be about tea. You actually did an Instagram story, this amazing rant about like a lot of Witchcraft 101 books.
Yeah. Yeah, oh my god. I'm such a bitch. Can I swear on this? Is that okay?
Oh my god, encourage.
I do. Great, okay, because I don't know how to not do that. It's horrible. But yeah, okay, so when you're talking about magic over the tea, that's not, like, I'm all for, like, the mundane, witchy, like, mundane magic type of stuff and, like, finding something magical in things that are everyday and kind of vice versa. But, like, if someone's gonna learn witchcraft and magic in a way that is, like, actually super potent and effective, like, praying over a tea is really not going to help anybody learn anything, is kind of my bitchy opinion. So for me, it's really important that people learn like basic energy practices and stuff like that, rather than like looking up a bunch of tea recipes and thinking that that's going to solve all their problems.
The end notes, you said, It has never been my intention to create a conventional academic product. What do you mean? This is an academic product?
Yeah, so that's actually my master's thesis, which I'm sure will sound super, yeah, which I'm sure will sound super sexy to some people and also really lame to other people. So hopefully that doesn't turn people off of it. But yeah, like I really believe that like philosophical academic research, like stuff that is actually rigorous, like it should be accessible to people. And so in the academy, oftentimes you get people doing this like really amazing research, but they just write it in a Word document, and then no one ever gets the benefit of that. And like as someone who is a practitioner but also a researcher, and I have this kind of like dual practice thing going on, like to me it's important to get it back to the community. I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a poet, and so doing an academic work that's just an essay would also like make me want to jump off a building as well. So it's like also partly selfish. That's kind of where that line in those endnotes came from. As someone who's a practitioner in the academy, I feel like doubly responsible, you know, like for the work that I produce, because there's so much work done by academics, like about witchy people, about magical practitioners, that is not grounded in actually knowing how to do it. We're doing a generalization from talking to like one coven or like one Freemason, like whatever the hell it is. And I just find that so fucked up and problematic. So I really wanted to do this thing that could appeal to both the academic sphere and also to people who actually get their hands dirty and practice. And I want it to be this like crossover. There was someone I was talking to who works at Catland. I guess the listeners who don't know, it's like the best witchy store in Brooklyn. It's fucking awesome. And they were telling me that like this book is like the one that they recommend to people who are new and don't know what the fuck is going on, because it is that kind of like worldview primer. Like in philosophy we would call it like an ontological kind of piece. It is about like what exists and how do we learn what exists. How does magic change what we think exists and what different beings in the world are capable of. What is magic? It's relational. It's about building relationships. And I think for me that's actually what's absent in like those pieces about the tea. There is no relationship there. It's just like it's a use value. It's using a product to do a thing. Like for me, like that's not what the hell I'm doing ever. It's about building a kinship, building a relationship.
When you say environmental advocacy, you're not just talking about, you know, like, like use less water and recycle more. That's not what you mean. What do you mean by environment?
Okay, so usually people do this thing where they see, like, we are people in the world. And so it's this, like, subject background dichotomy. And so, like, the type of philosophy that I do, which is called, like, object-oriented ontology, kind of new materialist philosophy. This is, like, super nerdy, so if this is, like, not interesting to people, like, you can forget that I said that. But so within philosophy, like, that kind of human ground standpoint is kind of referred to as correlationism. It's like there's the human and then there's the background. And so even a lot of people working in environmentalism see things that way, where it's like there's the human subject as like the most important thing, kind of, and then it's just our environment that we are walking on that is static, inert. It might be pretty and something to advocate for or whatever, but there is still this kind of secondariness to that really doesn't sit well with me personally. And so when I'm talking about environment, I'm also thinking about like how are we also environment? What kind of like what it boils down to for me is like interconnectedness between all beings. And so the type of philosophy that I'm interested in is like horizontal. So what does that mean? That means that we all kind of like equally are relevant. And so I don't center the human in what I do, like philosophically or magically. It's all about the networks of beings that are all interconnected, all acting on each other. We are shaped, of course, by our interactions with non-humans, whether that's plants, animals, chairs, tables. Like I'm sure, like just to use an example to illustrate what I'm talking about. Like if you've ever had like a really shitty bed or like a really shitty chair, like your back is gonna get fucked up after a while. And so that is a really like banal example of like an inanimate object slowly acting on you. So one of the interesting things about magic, like to me, is that it makes that relationship visible more than it otherwise usually is. Because we, in magic, usually people are not just kind of DIYing it completely. Like, we're collaborating with different objects, usually. Like, not always, but particularly if folks are, like, newer, you're going to be buying the incense, the candles, like, the stuff. And so there's this, like, collaborative nature to that. So when I think of environment, I think about how does the doing of witchcraft and magic change our understanding of what environment is and what non-human bodies are capable of and what they do, what they can do. And so when we're thinking about environmental advocacy, it is actually, funnily enough, like practicing magic for so long that turned me into someone who gave a shit about the environment. Really through doing magic for such a long time that I started to understand like that relationality over time, and like the kinship and like the equality of like myself and a tree. Like, we both exist in this world, so of course that tree or whatever it is like does not deserve to experience violence. And so it is through magic over time that I kind of learned that, you know, like not to see a tree as lesser than me. And I think that is kind of a really, really long answer to what on earth is the environmental advocacy piece about, because I think it's really, really common for people who care about environment to do this like top-down thing, where they're like, we, the great humans who are badass, are going to take care of that inert stuff that doesn't have a soul, that doesn't have agency, that doesn't have any thoughts or feelings about anything. And it's through doing magic that I've kind of realized, like, oh, like plants, animals, and, well, obviously animals, everyone kind of knows this, but plants and objects and, you know, cities and landscape has its own life. It's really like magic and magical practice that made that visible to me in that way. And then the advocacy piece is like, oh, right, yeah, we should all give a fuck about this. And like activism that is based on seeing the earth as inanimate or not having its own life and its own perspective is, I think, bound to fail. And so that like there is definitely like a political impetus behind what I'm trying to say with that book.
What you bring up is a fundamental shift in the Western mind. Actually, recently, Swami Anand Nisarg, he put up an article, and he's an I Ching expert, and he put up an article about how in Asian art, unlike in Western art, the human being is not the center of the art.
No, it's tiny as fuck, right?
Tiny.
It's like small as hell in this math environment, which I think is cool as hell.
You use the word in your book, anthropocentric or anthropomorphic, to describe like how we basically we're like human supremacists, right? And we see ourselves...
Oh, really? Yeah.
We're human supremacists. So even if we think of, you know, like those hippy-dippy people who are just like, man, Mother Earth, but at the same time, they see themselves as above Mother Earth, not the equal.
I know. It's so ridiculous. Okay, yes. Okay, so the other thing with that, too, is, oh my God, is there's also this, like, romanticization of, like, the earth. And so it's like there's these people who are, like, worshipping or whatever, working spiritually with the earth, but, like, don't make room for the fact that, like, pollution and, like, environmental destruction has, like, rendered their vision of what the earth is, like, non-existent. And so it's like, how do we connect spiritually with an earth or a planet that is, like, you know, everything is going extinct, the world is exploding, like, all the oceans are fucked, everything is fucked. And so how do we deal with that spiritually?
The neo-Wiccan, I love how you were like the Wiccany circly thing people, they just want the pristine nature.
They do. And I think, like, that's also a big issue, like, in all the 101s that are coming out now as well, is, like, they don't make space for the fact that this, like, pure, pristine idea of nature that they're holding up on a pedestal, like, no longer exists, and perhaps never did. Like, okay, so then should we only worship or work spiritually with the earth if it's pristine? What the hell does that mean? Like, the ethics of that are incredibly fraught to me personally. Like, I'm happy to work with, you know, like, I live in downtown, so, like, I'm happy to work, like, with, you know, my park across the street from me, which is full of, like, garbage, like, random needles on the ground, you know, like, random shit that's, like, just city stuff. Like, yeah, it's polluted, it's not pristine, and I think that realness of like what is the earth actually like does need to be incorporated into people's practice. There's this great book called Ecology Without Nature. It's something that I cite in the book, and it's written by this guy called Tim Morton. He actually wrote the foreword for the book. He's like amazing. I love him. And in that book he talks about the idea of nature being like really problematic for environmental movements, and he's talking about how environmental movements often put nature on a pedestal in the same way the patriarchy puts women on a pedestal. And like to me, when I read that, like my brain like exploded. I was like, yes, this is like the most true, real thing I've like ever read in my life. And so I always like keep that at the back of my mind, like whenever I'm thinking about like environment, especially as it relates to spirituality, and especially as it relates to like earth-based religions, which the contemporary neo-pagan movement I would say is definitely a part of that. Like, if people have an earth-based practice or work with nature, whatever the hell that is, in any kind of way, I think that that ethical piece does need to be considered.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because as you were speaking about this and about what Tim Morton said, I was thinking about that Madonna-whore dichotomy.
Yes.
Totally. So is, like Earth back in the day, that's the Madonna, right? It's Garden of Eden, it's Eve. But then once there's trash, once you got some graffiti up on like the building, once there's cement, it's fucking whore.
Totally. And like, yeah, we see that with how people spiritually work with the earth. And so if I can go on a rant about crystals for a minute, is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So I'm sure you've seen, there's some really great critiques that have come out recently about this crystal industry. They're pretty good critiques. I think one of them is in New Republic. Don't quote me on that. But they're pretty reasonable critiques, to be honest. So it's talking about how like the new age woo-woo, whatever, crystal industry, they use often like very unethical mining techniques, very unethical ways of obtaining the crystals and stones. Like child labor, slavery, no one gets paid well, it's like a shitstorm, it's a disaster, no one really knows where anything comes from, like the sourcing is incredibly confusing and like problematic and fraught. So okay, on one hand I'm like, yes, I agree completely, like I'm with you, makes sense, like this process like should be so much more ethical and above board and gentle than it is. So yes, I agree. But on the other hand, like how I've seen those critiques taken up by people who are sympathetic to them is like, oh, I'm going to throw out all my like pristine crystals and I'm just going to work with like the pebble that I got outside. Mm-hmm. And like to me that seems like also like a really problematic reaction in a way. It's like, okay, so it goes back to the Madonna-whore thing that you were just talking about. So it's like, okay, this thing is then tainted by the lack of ethics, so then it goes in the garbage. And like to me that also seems fucked up and wrong. It's like, why not work energetically with the thing that you have to clear out whatever violent energy is still in it from its means of production, like whatever trauma was enacted on that substance. Like why not just energetically work with that and work with it over time as a being that had a really violent experience rather than throwing it out.
Yeah, like what you bring up is actually one of my biggest pet peeves in that new age community, which is spiritual bypassing.
Yeah. Have you read the book? It's a book called just Spiritual Bypassing. I think it's by this guy Augustus Mathers or something. It's awesome. It's like a whole book about it. Totally would recommend.
One of the most insufferable people in the world, in my opinion, are those holier-than-thou raw vegans, right?
Oh my god.
And it's totally. Now, because they're just like, I don't want to externally judge, but I'm going to judge bodies now in terms of like the cleanliness of my internal body. I'm energetically superior than you because I'm a raw vegan. And the thing is that this also goes back for me, not only to spiritual bypassing, which is like, everything has to be clean. The environment's not clean. Fuck that shit. I'm going to clean myself. I'm not going to eat any cooked food. It's going to be raw vegan. But then it also goes back to this idea of, why am I doing this? Why am I asserting so much like weird flex, weird dominance over like nature? This is sort of like that man versus nature. Because
Oh,
you're part of
totally.
nature too, right? It's like,
Yeah.
why all this almost like eating disordery, overly controlling, overly dominant thing?
Oh, totally. Yeah, completely. Yeah, and like with something like that, it can often like veer on the edge of like orthorexia. Yeah, so if anyone does not know what that is, look up orthorexia. Yeah, it's super like control based. But the other thing too is like this movement towards purity. It brings me back to, not to get too nerdy, but Bruno Latour is one of my favorite philosophers of all time. I cite him all over the place in my book. I think he's amazing. And he's got this great book called We Have Never Been Modern. And so he, in that book, outlines like what are the like main points in modernity, and one of them is purity, and like the movement towards like purity and like desiring this like things to be pure. And I really see that in so much of what we're talking about, like with how people are desiring like the earth to be, how people want crystals to be, how people want women to be. Like all of this stuff to me is just so interconnected, and there's not a lot of room made for mess or pain or violence or violation, you know, like those crystals, we can bring it back to that too. Like they have been violently extracted. And like if you're going to be that being, that crystal going through that experience, what a violent traumatic experience to have. And then you're in someone's home lovingly, and then that person is like, oh, you're not pure enough for my spiritual practice, so
Oof.
to hell with you. Do you know what I mean? It's just like
Chills.
horrible. It's
Chills.
horrible, right? It's horrible. And to me, it goes completely against like my perspective on magic and witchcraft, which is so relationship based. And so I'm all about building relationship with everything I work with, whether that's a spirit, an object, a crystal, a plant, whatever the fuck it is. I don't care. Like I want to get tight with it. I want to be like homies, you know? And so to have this idea like, oh, this crystal is not like pure or whatever, and then to throw it away, like to me that is like not a relationship based thing to do. Like that is seeing that crystal as a use value. And like, you know, if any friend of yours or like relationship or whoever hell like in your life is seeing you as a use value at any point, like you know how shitty that is. Like the worst feeling ever. Right. To just feel like not seen and accepted as a being, but just used for like whatever the fuck it was. Like horrible. And so like for me, I don't really find it to be acceptable to treat like magical collaborators that way, even if it's just a stone. I just find it like completely unethical.
I think a lot of people, especially new witches, they might feel a little bit confused as in, wait, so if everything has spirit, like my paperclip, like that piece of dog shit on the sidewalk, it has spirit, you know, like I think they might be like, but wait, it's spirit if it's like incense and it's like blessed and stuff. But you're saying in this book, which I agree with, that everything in this environment, and that includes the dog shit, there's spirit there.
Oh, completely. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Everything. And so, for whatever fucking reason, I've always felt that way. Like, I was at home and, like, one of my parents, like, threw a magazine or whatever across the room or, like, on the ground to, like, be dramatic. I felt, like, upset for the magazine. I was like, oh my god, that's so rude. Like, that poor magazine. Like, I've always felt that way. And so, like, getting more deep into, like, witchcraft and magic, and then finding, like, the word animism, I was like, yes, this is what I am. This makes sense to me. And so, yeah, I think, like, it's super crucial to see the spirit and energy and the beauty in, like, the most mundane stuff. You need to see it, like, in the garbage, in the discarded things, in the dog shit, in the paperclip, in the stuff that is boring. Do you know what I mean? Like, not even distilling it to like the magical stuff. Like to me, that's like the most beautiful like transition that happens. Like when someone starts to become like a more advanced practitioner, I would say, is like when that awareness starts to spread, and it's not just distilled in the incense, the candle, the like herb that you bought at the witchy store with the like witchy label on it. Like that to me is like the most beautiful moment, like when people start to realize that that spirit and that beauty is in everything.
It reminds me of the Agori, right, and how they take the profane, So they'll
Yeah.
actually eat shit, human shit. They'll eat their meals out of a human skull. Because they're trying to erase the idea that some things are sacred and some things are profane, that there's beauty,
Yeah.
sustenance, and value in even the
Yeah.
most literal, shittiest thing. Decaying
Yeah.
bodies, things that most people find repulsive. Profanity
Yeah.
of whatever it is, embodied profanity. They're just like, give it to me. I love it. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And that's what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, because to me, that is a huge part of life that we love to just cut out. But life
Totally.
is about decay.
Yeah.
It's about death. It's, the circle of life, the Lion King, right?
Completely. No, I totally agree with you. And it goes back to what you were saying before about spiritual bypassing being like a disaster. And unfortunately, like, I don't remember, 20 years ago seeing much spiritual bypassing in witchcraft. It wasn't as much of a thing. And so I feel like now, unfortunately, like a lot of the newer works that are coming out, there is this like equation of witchcraft with wellness. And like witchcraft equals like feeling good. And like, so I'm of a few minds about that. So I do think that like one of my like avenues of practice and thought is about witchcraft as a form of like healing from trauma. Like that's a big thing for me right now. Like my next book is going to be about witchcraft and healing from like ancestral trauma, and that's this type of shit. It's going to be intense, and like so I believe in the healing wellness part of it in that way. But at the same time, like my witchcraft, like that's never what I go to it with. I'm never like, I want to feel good. That's like never my motivation. It's like, okay, what needs to be done? And often, like witchcraft for me embodies like the tower energy. Like if we're going to go to the tarot for some symbolism. And the tower is like an unpleasant shit show that no one really likes going through, but it's a paradigm shift that completely transforms everything and like paves the way for something beautiful. Like the tower comes right before the star. And the star is like when we find out like who we are, what our purpose is, all that cute, like warm, gooey shit. But like that can only happen once we, in my opinion, like magically welcome the disaster, the shit show, the complete transformation, and like the death card as well, like relates to this in a different way. But yeah, it's the wellness trend around witchcraft I find like deeply confusing, because like that's never ever what like my motivation for magical work is like feeling good, like never. It's like I want to work through this, I want to get that, I want to like heal from this thing. But oftentimes that process it means like you go through the crap, you don't jump over it. Which is spiritual bypassing is very much like the leaping over rather than like the sifting through it.
I call it taking an Uber through the valley of the shadow of death.
Play yourself.
You want to get up?
You want to play yourself? I'll call
You
the
want to
cops
get
right
up?
now.
You want to get
You
up?
want to play yourself?
You want to get
You
up?
want to play yourself?
You want to get
You
up?
want to play yourself? Call
Do
the
you get
cops.
up?
I'm going to tell them you holding me against my...
Interesting that this is black and white, right? So it's not like color.
Yeah.
And I felt as though it kind of set the mood for me that this isn't just about color and like feel good and yay, like cotton candy sweetness. This shower scene, it's like there's a knife and there's blood.
Yeah, man. I did that. That's like a thing. I did that ritual. That was an intense ritual. Yeah, that was crazy. The ritual was done when, I don't know, there was like this crazy hurricane situation. I don't know if you remember that at all. But it was bonkers. It was like crazy rain, like all the power here like went out. Like it was so windy that like a giant sign fell over and like killed someone. It was like crazy. Like it was crazy. I think it was like whenever New York flooded, it was like the same time like the subway flooded or something. I can't for the life of me like remember what year this was. But anyway, the point is energy was bonkers. It was like this hurricane type of situation, crazy. It was around Halloween and it was supermoon. Like the energy was just fucked. It was just next level, like big. I was with this dude for about 6 years, bless him. Like I still love this guy. I think he's a great person. But I just felt like in this rut, like about literally like everything in my life. Like I didn't know like what was wrong. Like everything was good, but I felt stuck. And so I did this ritual, and the point of it was to remove what no longer served me. Yeah, that's the scene. And so I had cedar that a friend of mine had harvested out by the country where she used to live. And so that's what that plant is it's cedar, which, in case listeners don't know, cedar has a very cleansing energy to it. Brushed my whole body in this shower with this cedar, and I cut my hand to kind of mark my commitment to that, to put my, my energy into that in a big way, And I spent the next 24 hours being like very physically ill. And so I was like, it's not what I asked for, guys. Can we like reverse that part? And so we reversed that part. It felt like this crazy like possession moment. That was fun. Lesson I learned on that. Be more specific. But I do feel like that bodily cleansing was also an important aspect of it. So that's fine. Like I dealt with it. It's fine. But the point of that ritual was to work with all of those different energies to just kind of create this shift. And within a month, that relationship was over. And this is like someone I thought I was going to marry, like I thought that was that. And like I totally have nothing bad to say about this person, but like we just were not like for each other. And it was crazy. Like everything just drastically changed with that ritual and on that spread. And like it was just crazy cleansing experience. It was very much a cleansing, banishing ritual, but it was a very non-specific. It was like whatever doesn't serve me at this point in my life, like make room for the next thing. You know best. I'm just gonna like ride the wave. Was very much what it was. And the reason why I phrased it that way was because of this crazy like hurricane, violent energy, and like a lot of my cleansing magic for myself does tend to be more violent and sudden rather than slow and gentle. To me, that is like the opposite of like the wellness trend that we're seeing right now. Like I would love to see like some talk in one of these new 101 books about, doing rituals like that. Like I think that's the type of ritual most people should be doing if you're new to magic, because then you realize like, whoa, this shit is potent and it's real. And like the results for me were like quite quick. And it's part of the point. Like we really don't experience that if we're just gonna like be praying over some tea or like a water bottle. You know what I mean? Like no one's gonna experience like a drastic life shift. Like praying over a water bottle. It's just, in my opinion, like not gonna happen. But maybe I'm just being a jerk.
Well, for the newbie witches, I'm sure like a newbie witch is gonna be like, well, what was the difference between praying over the water bottle versus doing this ritual? Was it that you cut your hand? Was it that you could pray over the water bottle, but the mindset, if your mindset was different, it would have worked? Like, what are the subtle differences between witchcraft that works, which is like what you did, versus the, witchcraft that's null, which is praying over the water bottle?
Totally, that's a great question. So, like, for me, like, the blood, that was like a sacrifice, right? So, I believe in the power of giving offerings when I do work. I think that's really important. I think the spirits need to be fed, and they're exerting their energy, they're doing shit. Like if a client is hiring me to do something, I'm gonna like be paid. And so like I always give regular offerings on my altar with like flowers, food, whatever the fuck, like alcohol, whatever it is. And so, like, to me, in that ritual, like, sometimes my offering is going to be, like, saliva, sometimes it's going to be blood, like, whatever it is. That giving of yourself, to me, that's important. So, if you're just praying over a water bottle, you don't have your ass on the line. You're not sacrificing anything. You're not making yourself in any way uncomfortable. You're not acknowledging that this process is going to be probably difficult and painful. And so, giving blood that belonged to me, it creates discomfort, it creates pain, and it's also a giving of my life force too. That's what blood is, right? Making myself vulnerable, putting myself on the line. And the cleansing piece is important, right? So if you're just praying over a water bottle, what's your magical collaborator? It's a water bottle, right? So what's the point of that? Water, okay? So that's a collaborator. The bottle is another collaborator. So the water, what's the point of that? It like nourishes you. So it's all about you feeling good, right? So it's nourishing. Water gives life, gives energy. And so if you're doing what I did in that ritual, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend anyone copy word for word. Like I do think rituals do need to be like quite tailored to the situation. But for me, I was collaborating with cedar. So that's a very powerful plant spirit, I would say. It's like quite intense and it's like scraping through of all the muck. It does that quite effectively and quite quickly, I think. And so there's that collaborator that's doing something. And then the shower water is also cleansing. It's a more gentle cleanse. So there's a cleanse happening on 2 different levels, right? One is more gentle, more kind of watery. Another one is more solid. It's like a bit more intense. So there's those 2 things that are happening there. Okay, so the other thing that's going on is I'm working with the moon phase, full moon, big deal. Halloween time, so the ancestors are like all up in everyone's shit, basically. And then the hurricane, which is also another cleansing and like fucking up everyone's stuff, like getting rid of everything violently. And so working with all of those different energies at one time, intentionally, and being open to the mystery of the universe and being like, what, do your thing, I am accepting what you want. What ended up happening from that was like a better shift than I could have designed myself, but it's also something that I would not have thought to ask for. And so sometimes it's trusting the universe, sometimes the universe knows best. Working with all those different collaborators, all those different energies, all those different spirits. Very, very, very different thing than just like spraying some generic bullshit over a water bottle. So a bunch of different reasons why, okay? So you don't feel anything. You're not opening yourself up to risk. You're not putting yourself on the line. And also there's no opportunity to measure the impact of what is going on. So when I did that ritual and I was like, cleanse me of my bullshit right now, please, that's asking for something measurable. So if I went like 6 months and nothing different happened, I'd be like, oh, fuck, I fucked up somewhere. Like, or I'm good. Or there was something that needed to be cleansed, actually. Whereas with the water bottle, if you're just praying for good vibes over the water bottle, how do you measure that? How do you, like, where's the evidence? How do you decide that was effective? Your day was like slightly better. Like how do you then gain belief in your own abilities and the practice that you're engaging in? There's no way. It to me it goes back to that spiritual bypassing piece, which is just like you know, this positive thinking, the secret type of bullshit.
And it reminds me very much of 2 things. First, what Frater Ashen Chassan said about if you want magic to be real magic is dangerous because it can actually affect your reality. If you want to have real magic, which is by its nature dangerous, then you need to basically do things that are a little bit dangerous. You can't do Tempur-Pedic magic. The second thing was of Alkistis Dimech of Scarlet Imprint. She talks a lot about the occulted body.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, you know, like when you cut your hand and you're cleansing yourself, you're working with not just this physical body, but the hidden occulted body. I thought a lot of this black and white stuff, it was to also talk about that hidden occulted body. You talk so much about this witch body, you know, this body that is intelligent and primal and magical. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start with that. But I think part of it, and thank you for your observations, like very humbled by that and happy about it. But I think like the title of the book, which like no one's actually ever asked me about that, which I find like shocking. Like people make jokes about it. They're like, ha ha ha, Witchbody, haha. But it's like, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about like networks of beings. Like everything is interconnected. So in a sense, like which body are we talking about, right? Because there are so many bodies interconnected all the time, always. You know, like you're not just you in and of yourself in a vacuum. Like you're not an island. You are also so held up by so many other bodies, like literally a chair right now, you know, other different things around you that you collaborate with all the time, like whatever your living space is, like the house spirits, all of that. And so part of the title is actually also this riff on like the networked body, like the body that is always in community in a sense. And I think if we are witches or people who practice magic, it's crucial to be aware of the networked body, the body that is in community always, and always relational, right? Like always building relationships with other entities, whether those are human, non-human, whatever it is.
I think a lot of people, they'll do magic like when, you know, they want their boyfriend back or, you know, whatever. Yeah. But this sort of everyday magic you're talking about, this realization of the witch body and the environment, that's a lot more difficult to maintain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay, great question. So for me, it's also about maintaining those relationships when there's nothing to be asked for, like when there's nothing to gain. So that example that you used about someone doing magic, like when they have a breakup and they want to get someone back, like I've done that. It didn't work out. So like that type of magic works. It's like, no, I wouldn't recommend it. But regardless of that, to me, it brings me this idea of not only coming to magic when you want something, whether it's a person, a job, money, an object, a house, an outcome. It's showing up for no reason. It's just maintaining the relationship when we're not trying to be extractive. And so like everyone, like the example I tend to use, like everyone's got that friend that like only calls when they want something. Like everyone hates that person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like everyone hates that person. So like I would just like try not to be that guy, like try not to be that friend that like only calls like, hey, I'm moving tomorrow, I haven't seen you or talked to you in like 3 years, but like do you want to help me move my heavy shit for like 2 days, you know? And so to me, like the hard part, if we're going to use that phrasing you were talking about of it all, is just showing up regularly all the time. You know, it's like the same way that you would text a friend you haven't seen in a while, like, you know, once a month, maybe every few weeks, just check in for no reason. And like you're not in a crisis, they're not in a crisis, no one wants anything, but it's like a maintenance of relationship, like maintaining that connection without wanting to get at something extractive from it. And so for me, that is like giving offerings, like when I'm not doing ritual. So I need to like replenish my flowers on my altar right now. My spirits are like getting grumpy, but it's like a bit dry. But like generally speaking, like I always have fresh flowers on my altar. Like maintaining that is one of the most important things for me that I do. I always try to, like whenever I do the flower replenishment, I always will put like cold water on the altar, replenish that, you know, switch up the offerings, like maybe clean it up every few months. Like I don't do that often because spirits don't care, at least the ones I work with. But having those offerings done regularly, to me, is a way of maintaining that relationship. And I only ask for shit pretty rarely. Like I actually don't ask for stuff as often as I give to them. And so, like, I guess that might sound hard to some people, but to me, it's just, it goes back to the fact that, like, for me, magic is relational. It's about relationship building. And so, like, that's what bothers me about the wellness magic narrative, is people then see magic as a thing that gives them wellness. So it's still use value based, but the use is you extract wellness, whatever the hell that is, from that practice. And so for me, I need to give those offerings and maintain those relationships regardless of how well I am or what I'm asking for, whether it's a big ask, small ask, you know, whatever it is. It's like, to me, it's regular contact, even if it's just like, hey dudes, what's up, you know, like here's some incense. Yeah, like I don't think I could work with spirits who needed like a more formal like address. It's just not my vibe. Last time I did a ritual where my dead grandmother on my mom's side showed up, and I was wearing like a bathrobe, like I looked like a total ridiculous person, and she was like, yeah, you're doing magic in a robe. Nice. I was just like, oh fuck. Like, you know, so the spirits like make jokes at me about like how ridiculous and like too chill I am with magic in a robe. They don't think about like a bathrobe. They think about this like spooky, you know, thing. But like for me, it's so much more down to earth and so much more like practical and real. Like I don't have like magic clothes that I wear. I just wear whatever for the fuck that I happen to be wearing at that point, and everyone can deal with it. And so I think sometimes there's this weird like, oh, the relationship maintenance is hard because I have to have a shower because I have to be clean. I have to wear the magic outfit. It has to be magic time, full moon, or whatever the fuck. And it's like, no, like none of those things have to be there. You can be wearing your pajamas. It can be some random middle moon phase, like some fucking 3/4, whatever. You don't even need to know what the phase is of like the sun or the, you know, whatever sign everything is in. Just like show up, say hi, like high five your spirit people, and then go to bed. Like it doesn't have to be a big deal. And I think that's a bit of it. Like it can be casual, it can be a part of daily life. It doesn't have to be this like really crazy intense process that you have to like really take like 4 hours of the day to do. Like I'm sure some people do that and like good for them, but it doesn't have to be that way. With clients privately to teach them like magic skills and stuff, like the two big problems I see with people, either they're too open or too closed. So people who are too open, they have like so much spirit noise all the time, and they are so overwhelmed. They're always exhausted. They don't know how to like parse it all apart to make sense of it. It's just too big, too much going on. And then the total opposite of that is the people who don't know how to connect. They can't for the life of them feel energy at all. And so I work with these like two extremes of people, and it goes back to what I was saying with, you know, it's always, all of this shit is always around, but it's about being able to control like you're tuning into it or not. So that's the other piece with this too, is like the ability to actually harness it. And so like for me, like I can whatever, talk to spirits, hear them, all of that shit, but like I turn that actually off most of the time. You know, attune our ear, you know, like how to like tune things in, tune things out, and kind of control that once we do learn that language.
Like, let me use myself as an example.
I
don't think that I'm naturally attuned. Like, just, this is just my personal opinion. Like, compared to a lot of other people in the magic community, I go into a haunted house, everybody sees spirits, and I'm just like, I see nothing. But my imagination's going crazy, right? I'll be the first person to shit my pants, but I won't actually see spirits, right?
Yeah.
Although people have said your imagination may actually be you connecting. But anyways, that's another story. But let's say like somebody like me, I'm just like, okay, I want to connect. So, but the thing is, I'm not naturally like connected. I want to believe that I'm part of this environment and stuff, but I see dog shit and it's just dog shit. Totally. My life is kind of like dreary, and it's like very hard to find that in. Where's that in?
I love this question. Amazing. Okay, so with spirit work and with mediumship and energy work, there's like, you basically have like different sensory skills with that, just like you do with anything, right? So just like in normal mundane life, like there's some people who have like a crazy taste palette, you know, like they can taste the, you know, like all the differences and all the wines. They can like have the wine and be like, oh, this one is like apricot and smoke or whatever the hell, and you can taste it and be like, I don't know, it's just wine, I don't know what you're talking about. But there's some people who've got like a crazy palate, right? They can taste any crazy shit. There's some people who like are amazing at listening, and they can hear like all of this nuance in music, and who are amazing with smell. You know, they can tease out like all the different notes in a perfume and tell you like, how does that. There's some people who like visually are super skilled, right? With spirit work and with energy work, I feel like it's very much the same thing, right? And so everyone is going to have like their senses that are easier to key into than others. And so like for me, with my own energy work practice, like my particular like whatever aptitudes are clairsentient, so that means like clear feelings. Like I feel like tingles and stuff. So I feel like heat, I feel cold, I feel sensations like on my body whenever there's like spirits chilling. So get voices. So it's clairaudience, like I will hear, right? And I also will sometimes see, so it's clairvoyance. And so for me, like as an artist, it makes sense that I would see. Like I'm also a writer and a poet, so it makes sense that I would hear. And so that is the easiest ways for me to connect with spirit stuff. And so what I usually will ask people to do is like, if you're going to find your entry point, be like, what senses of yours normally are like more particularly skillful or astute? And so I would ask you that, like, how do you usually like relate to the world that you live in? Like, are you more auditory? Do you music? Are you more visual? Are you like, what is your own vibe with all of that stuff? Just normally.
What if somebody says, well, you know, like I'm really good at playing sports?
So to me, that would be like an embodied knowledge, right? So to me, that's sensory. To me, it would be a very clairsentient, because sports are so deeply embodied. To me, sports is so related to magical work, because like there's a lot of research on sports that you have to be in this flow state. And so to me, like I would call something like that like trance. You know what I mean? Like I would consider that to be like kind of low-key possession, right? And so like for me, whenever I'm in that state, there's a few different ways I'm in that state. So it's either a magical ritual, it's or like art making or sex. So those are like the three areas of my life that I know how to just like go there and like completely put my brain on a shelf, go into the flow state, start the thing, do the thing, and then like come back to reality afterwards and like control that. And so actually very, very fucking similar to that, really. Like, you have to, like, get in the zone. A lot of sports people are super superstitious, really ritualized. You know, they wear the same underwear, they, like, hit their head a few times, you know, they, like, click the thing, you know, whatever the hell it is. They, like, say a prayer, they have their, like, theme song. Like, sports are so ritualized, you know what I mean? Like, they're so about, like, creating that ritual to go into the flow state, to then channel something, and then to come out of it. So to me, that's, like, so, like, 100% relevant to magic. Like, it is ritual, very much.
Right here, I want to add that there's people right now who are just like, well, my only talent is I know how to put on makeup. Well, I'm just like, girl, that is meditation right there. Like, the 12-step, like, Korean skincare ritual, that's, you know, you get into this, like, state where it's like, you know, you have to massage your face a certain way, and then you, like, totally get into, like, this zone. And, like, when I'm putting on makeup, like, I enter into a completely different reality, right? I'm not in this world anymore because I'm focused on creating this. So it's like people who get a lot of pleasure out of maybe housework, you know, like.
Totally, 100%. Like, so what is going on there? It's a flow state. It is like a trance state. Like, you're channeling something, right? Like, you're creating a space where you're able to just kind of be a vessel for something else. And, like, to me, that is a great way to practice, like, opening yourself up to, in a way that would be useful later for mediumship and receiving message from spirit, if that's a thing that you care about. Or even just noticing energy, right? Like, to me, any type of flow state is crucial, whether it's makeup or sports or house cleaning, whatever it is. Like, that is, like you said, a meditative type of state. It does something completely different to your mind and your body, and you're just a bit more, like, receptive. Like, there's something biologically different that's happening there, and I think, like, that's completely 100% applicable to, like, learning magical work, like, 100%.
So let's say you become more aware of your flow states. So you're kind of like, oh, you know, like, while I'm doing housework, I'm just like, okay, like, I'm in flow state. This is, like, part of, like, being the witch body, you know, like the occulted body. And then what? What's next?
Right. So I love this question. Okay. So then, oh my God, like, to me, this type of question, it's hard to answer in a generic way. It's like, I tend to work, like, so one-on-one with people when it comes to this. But it's like, okay, so once you notice, like, your skill set of a particular sense start to develop, do that, like, in a more spiritual space that's, like, not that space. Like, let's say if it's sports. And so it's like, okay, if you've got experience creating a flow state, okay, like, so you know you need this song, you know you need the light to be this way, you know you can be, like, wearing that pair of underwear and, like, that pair of socks. Okay, so, like, you need these things to trigger your flow state. Awesome. Okay, so what would it mean then to do all of those things when you're entering, like, your ritual for the full moon? What happens then? And find out. Often I think two people, like, give up too early. You know, like, they'll try this, like, once, and they'll be like, oh, I suck. I'm so closed off. I can't do it. And it's like, no, man, like, keep trying. Like, it's like when people try to, like, take one, like, literally just one Spanish class, and they're like, oh, I give up. I don't know Spanish. Fuck. You know what I mean? It's like, no, man. Like, you got to, like, work on that for, like, a few years, and then you'll be able to kind of figure it out. And so oftentimes I think people who are maybe a bit more closed off, sometimes are looking for this more immediate result that only, like, it's just impossible. Like, I think, like, maybe it's not completely impossible, but it's quite unlikely to get an immediate response just in the span of, like, you know, one session, you know? Like, I'm going to remember 2 words from that one Spanish class, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to know how to make a sentence. It's, like, not going to happen. And so I think people also need to be patient and kind with themselves, you know? Like, it takes time. So once you know how to get yourself triggered into the flow state, apply that to your spiritual space. And then do that again and again and again and again. Take notes and find out what works and what doesn't. And just pay attention to your whole situation. Write down the messages that come through. And, like, I think oftentimes too, people will, if they take notes, and they'll kind of be able to look back and be like, oh, fuck, that was, like, I channeled a thing that then happened 6 months later, and if I didn't write that, like, one silly sounding sentence down, I wouldn't have been able to validate that for myself. So that's the other thing, is, like, write it down, because then if you're new, you'll get to validate it. And I think, like, that builds confidence, and then that builds, like, lack of fear, which also helps with the flow state.
just love everything that Sabrina has to say. And of course, her book, Witchbody, is gorgeous, accessible, and you can also get a copy of this book. Again, open to anybody, anywhere in the world, international. What I would like you to do is write in the comments below what you feel you would like to see in Witchy 101 books. Like, what are some topics that maybe you feel that other authors haven't yet touched on, or you would like authors to touch more upon? I'm going to open this on both Instagram and YouTube. If you follow me on Instagram, which is Hi Chassan, I'll link it down below, you can enter both on Instagram and on YouTube. I'm gonna choose like a lot of great comments and then randomly choose the winner. You can enter in this one, and also there's gonna be a part 2, and you can also enter in part 2. So there's another chance for you to win this book. See you there.